I am going to let our panelists introduce themselves because they will do a much better job of it than I possibly could. So I'm going to call on you in turn. Tell us who you are, what you do now, what you did in your Skills for Success experience a bit, and then we'll come on to some of our planned questions later. So I will start with Ellen.
Hi everyone, so I'm Ellen. I work at the Scottish Crannog Centre up in Kenmore as the Marketing and Engagement Manager. I did my traineeship in the same place, so I did my traineeship here at the Crannog Centre from August 2018 to 2019, and then took over the role the day after I finished my traineeship, basically. So at the moment I deal with all the marketing, any social media, any kind of communication in and out of the building, with the outside sector, the hospitality sector, other museums and organisations. So I basically do all the communication aspect, and I also do a lot of the evaluation on site as well. So when I did my traineeship, I covered quite a lot. I did a lot of the operational side, doing tours, doing interpretation outside as well, because we do a lot of outdoor interpretation. Did a little bit of collections as well, but I mainly focused on the marketing and evaluation. And my predecessor handily decided to retire at the end of my traineeship and handed me the reins. So I've been here ever since.
Fantastic, thanks so much. I think we're going to dive into some of that a little bit later. Elliot, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
My name's Elliott Melton. I work at the Scottish Maritime Museum. I am the Learning and Access Assistant. I deal with the schools and community groups that come to the museum itself, which right now is a bit up in the air due to COVID, but we've moved on to online learning with schools and online community groups as well. I did my training for Skills for Success at the museum as well. I did it in the Learning and Access role under the old supervisor, Jamie Menzies. I worked with him to do schools, educational visits, and reminiscence and community groups as well. And that allowed me to get the training for the role that I'm in right now.
Fantastic. Hermione.
Hi, I'm Hermione Hoffman. I'm currently working at Paxton House in the Scottish Borders as the General Manager. When I was on the Skills for Success programme, I was at Museums Galleries Edinburgh, where I worked as a Trainee Learning and Programmes Manager. I devised and developed and made some online learning resources for schools, for some of the museums that they manage.
Great. And Megan.
Hello, I'm Megan. I currently work in Calendar House in Falkirk as an interpretation and engagement assistant. So majority of the time it's in period, costume and a Georgian kitchen. I get to do a lot of planning and organising events for primary schools and reminiscence work in that role. And I also have a job in Kilmarnock in the Dick Institute, and that's as a museum intern for the Dean Castle Restoration Project, which is ongoing and has been ongoing for the past few years. And that's mainly working kind of collections and digitisation side. So they have a few recognised collections in Kilmarnock, so it's photographing them, make sure that they're kept in the correct conditions, and that they are recorded correctly, and just making sure that they're stored correctly for when they're able to go back on display in Dean Castle. So I done my traineeship from August 2018 to August 2019 in Dumfries Museum, which is a relatively small museum. Well, small as in they don't have that many members of staff, but they do a massive amount. They cover so many venues over Dumfries and Galloway. So I really got to kind of dip my toe in to several different aspects of the job role. I was only a collections trainee, but I got to do a lot there and was involved in a lot of things.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for those intros. Let's dive straight in with getting a bit of an understanding of the Skills for Success program. So what I'd love to know is why you wanted to do it, but also a bit about the process of how you got to do it as well. So what was the process like of getting onto your traineeship? And I'm going to start with Hermione this time. You're muted. Yeah.
Yes, sorry. So for me, it was I saw an advert for this program on LinkedIn, but I missed the deadline, and then it was extended. So I took that as a sign that I should apply. And you had to make a video as part of your application, and why. And I'm quite shy, so I didn't particularly enjoy doing that, but I have a huge family, so I used them and I got them to sort of run around, and I filmed them and did like a voiceover bit, which meant that I was able to cope. Anyway, we then had an interview process where you had to work collaboratively together and do certain tasks, and then you had a more formal interview after that. So that was sort of the process of how and why. And I was quite lucky. I was, yeah.
Great, thank you. And Ellen, was it similar for you?
Yeah, so I actually worked in the hospitality industry. So I worked at a really large hotel in my hometown of Crieff. And I was just kind of working there because I needed a job, basically, but wasn't something I was super interested in. So I'd actually started to look for jobs in the third sector, because that's my interest and what I'm kind of studying towards at the moment in my spare time. So after looking for jobs in the kind of charity sector, I found the application for this traineeship, and I thought it sounded really interesting. So I applied. I did the video similar to Hermione. Didn't put myself in the video, but yeah, I made the video, got an interview. The interview process was pretty interesting because it was a group effort. It wasn't just your bog standard go in and sit down. So it was quite interesting to do that. And then yeah, I got the position. So I just wanted to move away from hospitality, but into a similar sector, because it is still working with people, with the public, but it's just a little bit more rewarding.
And Elliot, were you in your video when you applied?
I was in my video. I decided to embrace the Irvine Harbour side. So I myself worked in the Maritime Museum beforehand in visitor services. So what I decided to do was video myself doing a kind of guided tour of the Irvine Harbour, talking about a bit of the history and some of the vessels that the museum has already. And I got my sister to film that because luckily she went to uni to do filming. So I had a great resource there. So I decided to ask her to film me doing a video about the harbour.
Brilliant. And Megan, what was your kind of process and why did you want to get involved?
So I've always been really interested in kind of the arts, and history is a really big thing that I'm interested in as well. So I went to college for 3 years to do more kind of like, I done jewellery design, I done a year of model making, and then I done a year of interior design. Couldn't really decide what I wanted to do. So then I was like, okay, I'm going to travel. So I went to Australia for a year, and then when I was there, I was like, I really need to do something. Came back and couldn't get any work, so I got a job in Virgin Media in sales, which I hated. I cannot sell anything. So I was just looking on, I think it was Indeed, a job website or something like that, and the Skills for Success program was advertised. So I had a good look at it, and it was just like ticking so many boxes. It's, you know, what I'm interested in. I've always loved museums as well, never worked in one. And I just recently signed up to do an Open University course in art history and humanities, purely just because it was something I was interested in. So yeah, I applied kind of halfway through, I think like everyone else, for sitting down and creating a video never done anything like that for a job application. So that was completely strange. Luckily, similar to Elliot, my good pal Dave makes comedy sketches. So it's a bit different from what he was used to. So he filmed my video application. And then, yeah, I think the thing that appealed to me most as well about Skills for Success is that there were so many organisations that you could apply to, literally from Orkney and Inverness right away down to the borders. And you can apply to everyone. There was no limit. So I probably applied to every single organisation in Scotland that would let me. So that was a big plus, because I really wanted to get out of sales. It wasn't for me. So yeah, that's what the reasons I applied, really.
Oh, fantastic. I'd like to think a bit about kind of what your traineeship involved and what you did. And I think what I'd really love to know is how it kind of prepared you for the museum work you're now doing, or that you kind of have in your mind that you want to do in the future. If that's museum work, or if it's not, if it's prepared you for something else, I'd love to hear that as well. I think I'll start with Elliot.
That's perfect. The museum, the Skills for Success definitely changed my outlook on everything. I was already working quite closely with schools already, doing visitor services, but I never actually thought of that as a career path for myself. But with the Skills for Success program, doing the actual learning and access traineeship, it's definitely changed my focus more to the point now I've moved away from the visitor side of things. I definitely want to deal more with schools and also with more actually communities as well, and especially just training and educating people. It's definitely changed my whole focus, and that was all due to the units I picked during the SVQ, which were all very much education focused. Some of them were tutorial focused, and I loved getting to be able to pick the different units for the SVQ of what I actually wanted to learn as well. That was quite good. It gave me quite a varied experience. But yeah, it's definitely changed my whole focus and my career path moving forward. It was quite good, especially someone who within school myself didn't get the grades that I wanted to, and I didn't think that career path was going to then be available to me. But something like this was definitely that step in the right direction, that kind of foot forward that I needed.
Thanks. I'm just going to come back to you just with a follow-up question. For those of us who don't know what an SVQ is, can you describe it briefly?
It's kind of like a workplace training program is the best way to put it. It's all about working and proving your work that you're doing and sending it off to be assessed by people, and showing that you have the knowledge of the job that you are doing and that you're training to be doing that job to the right standards held by museums or your organization you're working in.
Thank you. It's really helpful. I'll come to Megan next on the same question. So kind of how did your traineeship prepare you, and how did you pick what units you were interested in?
Okay, I suppose like the traineeship was kind of like a wee beacon of light or opportunity during a time period when, you know, I was feeling quite lost. And in terms of picking the units that I was interested in, I think because I'm quite a what's the word I'm looking for? Not quite like a happy-go-lucky kind of person, and really wanting to just like try everything. It was difficult for me to narrow down the selection choices, but I sat down with my manager at the time, Lydia Costello, and she's just so calm and kind of like, you know, we talked through everything that my job role would cover. So there were some ones that were I wasn't going to be able to cover, like be able to do, such as like photography and stuff like that. You need to have a professional to do those units. There's certain kind of like little bits that aren't you can't cover. So I looked at things like that. In terms of preparing me for museum work afterwards, I generally feel that above all else, the SVQ and above the SVQ qualification, it's the hands-on experience that has been the biggest help moving forward into job roles. When I've applied for jobs and then went for interviews, with a lot of applications, it's you need to have a degree, but I'll just apply anyway. And so if I do get to interview and they see the experience, a lot of interviewers are really like, you know, they love that, because not many people have both the degree and the experience. So it's interesting to have, you know, the qualification and the experience. I found that has helped a lot. Also, networking has been amazing during the traineeship. I've met so many people within like this Scottish heritage sector. The training from like amazing professionals at NMS. We've had so many traineeship like workshops and stuff from there. And yeah, just I've got like a list. I think we done 15 workshops altogether within a year, and that's covering things from working with communities, volunteer management and support, project planning, digital skills, measuring social impact and advocacy training, employability skills, money matters. Like, they covered so much stuff within a year that really helped towards professional development as well. Yeah.
Thanks. That sounds amazing to have so much kind of support through the traineeship and things that are available to you.
Yeah, definitely.
I wonder, Ellen, if I could come to you next, sort of how did you feel it prepared you, and what choices did you make on the path you were following?
Yeah, so I was hired as the engagement trainee for the Scottish Crannog Centre. So I did thankfully get to still cover quite a lot of different areas, because in the SPQ, the qualification itself, we're talking about units here. So just a bit of background, you do have to do mandatory units or modules, as well as ones that you get to pick. So I did get to cover collections and things like that, even though that wasn't really my job role, which was really good. But I did a lot of the marketing and evaluation purely because, as well as being interested in it, it was what the organisation needed as well, which is also a big part of when you do these traineeships. You know, pick what you're going to be doing anyway, because it's going to help you get that qualification in the end. So yeah, it was really good that I got to actually do a lot of the different stuff though, because as someone who has to market the museum, it's given me such a good foundation to be able to market, because I'm not looking at it from a really narrow, like, I've not come from a marketing background at all. I've never done marketing until I worked here. But I did, you know, I was doing tours every day. I was doing a lot of the outdoor interpretation, so I was fully dressed in Iron Age costume, which was also an interesting part of the role. But because I know all the information, and I could hopefully go out and do a tour now, even though that's not part of my job description, we are a bit of a jack of all trades here at the Crannog Centre, because you have to be. I was out handling wood the other day, helping to wheelbarrow wood into a shed, so you never know what you're going to be doing. But I feel like I'm so much better able to market the place in general, because I know exactly what goes on and what we have to do and what's available. So yeah, it's just given me a really good solid foundation about museums in general, so I can market it to the best of my abilities. And as Megan said as well, the networking that we've kind of made our group of friends, but also a massive network. And I've realized from continuing to work, especially in a communications role, that networking is huge in this sector. It really helps to know the right people, and thankfully we've got a huge advantage from doing this traineeship, because we've got our network, and we can help each other. So that's also been really good as well.
Fantastic. There's a question about networking in the chat, which we will come on to a little bit later. I just want to go to Hermione as well to get your kind of thoughts on how it prepared you for what you do now.
I suppose that for me it was quite surprising. We had a little chat, Megan, Ellen and Elliot and I, the other day, and I was saying that there were aspects of the traineeship that I just thought were really irrelevant to me. So for example, looking at pest traps and environmental monitoring and the sort of collection care side of it. And I thought, I'm never going to need to know this information. And then I have started as a general manager, and I now use all of it. And I have a box of all my stuff that we got from the year, and I go through and I'm like, oh, I need this bit today. And, you know, so actually it's really surprised me how much of it was relevant to what I'm now doing. Whereas I thought I'm, you know, never going to need all of this stuff, but actually it's been really good. And the level of learning is actually really good. So it's a solid, like Ellen said, it's a solid foundation for working in museums. So it's been really, really, really useful.
Excellent. I think it sounds like because you get to have a go at a lot of different things, it gives you a lot of options for a direction, and then you're always going to find that useful no matter what direction you choose to go in, which I think is brilliant. You touched on it like a little bit about thinking at the time that some of the things might not be relevant to you. I wonder if we could reflect a bit on some of the challenges around doing a traineeship, but also some of the challenges you might have experienced coming out of your traineeship into the wider world of work, for lack of a better way of phrasing it. I think I might I'll come straight back to Hermione, because you had mute off.
So some of the challenges were that sometimes you felt you might be floundering a little bit in your role, that you weren't sure you were doing the right thing. Occasionally, for me, I'd never done any vocational learning before, and I kept sort of thinking I didn't understand it. So it was quite a challenge for me to fully understand what I was meant to do. It took me a while to grasp that, and I just, you know, I'd never sort of used an online portfolio where you had to submit the work and things like that. So for me, it was quite a challenge learning that side of it. When after completing it, it's a really tough job market. It's really, really hard. And even with years of experience or, you know, a new qualification, it was still extremely competitive. And whilst I got lots of interviews, I had an awful lot of negatives and sort of no's, and I didn't get or you came second kind of thing. So so it's still really, really, really hard to find work within the museum field. And the other thing I think is that, you know, sometimes you sort of think, I don't know, it's just that tough competitive market. So it's a tough one to break into. But like Ellen said earlier, you met all these people and you end up eventually getting something, you get somewhere. So we're quite lucky.
I think that's been reflected in quite a few of our panels so far this week about kind of, it is just a difficult market. It was difficult before 2020. It's difficult now for different reasons, but it is very competitive. And that's why a lot of people might be thinking about doing a traineeship to give them a different kind of, I don't want to use the phrase leg up, but I think that some people might feel that that's how it can act for them. I wonder, Elliot, if you could reflect maybe on some of the challenges for you.
Some of the challenges for myself were definitely, in some way, it was a bit of like, still a bit of a stigma attached to, oh, it's a traineeship. So for myself, I wasn't really doing much of the paperwork or applying for funding or that kind of stuff. But then as soon as the traineeship finished and I got into the job role that I was in, it very much felt like I was chucked in the deep end in that retrospect. But luckily I have a very understanding manager who's been helping me guide more along that route and been giving me more of that work then to try and build myself up in that kind of retrospective learning and applying for funding. So there is some bits where you feel like you might have missed out on some bits because it is a traineeship, but then as a whole, it also then still allows you to build more upon yourself in that retrospect. You then know, oh, I know I'm missing out on this bit here and this bit here, and there's a bit of knowledge here that I don't know. And going to all these training courses that you went to, it's given you all that information to then be like, oh, wait there, no, I can look back on this and patch up this information here and be able to use these notes that I took at this traineeship or these notes that I took at this kind of seminar I went to be able to patch up all that information and kind of, as you said, get a leg up or get your foot in the door and be able to realize, oh, wait there, no, because of this traineeship, I have such a wide variety of knowledge that I'm able to then pinpoint on certain things that I need to do.
And I suppose it must be quite helpful as well, because you've got a network of people working in different organizations that you know. If you suddenly have something presented to you, but you think, oh, wait, hang on, I know that so-and-so is working in this organization, I bet they already know about that. it gives you kind of some other options to speak to, I expect. Do you all stay in touch? Just by show of hands, do you all like talk to all the other people you're on your traineeships with? Yeah, lots of nodding. Excellent. No, I think it's really great.
We have like a group chat so of all the old kind of skills for success group people on WhatsApp and stuff. And we all keep in contact and update that on a regular basis, just to kind of keep in contact with each other at least.
That's brilliant. I'm like so pleased to hear that. I wish I'd had that when I was coming into the sector. I didn't just sit there going, I don't know what to do. Everything's confusing. Megan, I'll come to you now. I think I haven't come to you on this question about kind of the challenges that you experienced and what you've experienced since.
Yeah, I would just to add to what kind of Elliot was talking about there, I definitely think that keeping in contact and having the network and everything like that has been a massive help. And just, like sharing the knowledge whenever anyone was struggling with anything during the traineeship, like our units or anything like that, we were all in the same boat and quite open that to like if someone knew something, then they would share it with other, because we're all in different job roles in the traineeship as well. So that was a massive help for me. In terms of challenges during my traineeship, honestly had the best year. But since then, I would say I have found it quite difficult to shed the like trainee learner intern role. I mean, I'm still in a museum intern job, although what I'm actually doing within that role, I would say, is kind of like a collections officer role, but I've not been successful as of yet to actually get that kind of role. So that's one of the things that I'm really struggling with at the moment. Also, as well, I still suffer every now and again from like the imposter syndrome kind of thing of being like, oh, I've just done a traineeship and I only have an SVQ. I don't belong here. These people know so much more than me. That's more of a personal thing, but I think everyone must struggle with that at some point, which is as a challenge, a daily challenge for me.
I think it's really interesting that you pick up on imposter syndrome. Thinking back to some of our other panels, like we had a panel about like doing a museum studies course, and people in that course are saying that they can get imposter syndrome because they are coming in with a qualification, but they don't have any practical experience. So I think it's a really difficult, I think everyone in any place experiences imposter syndrome for different reasons. So maybe all of us are actually fine. I think it's so complicated.
So it's kind of like the flip side. So I know like we have the experience, but it's not having the degree that I was like, oh, I don't have a piece of paper to show that I can do this. And, so that's still on the regular.
It's definitely quite a wide sector issue, I think. And I've heard from other people running trainee schemes. We talked on Monday, we had a session about kind of how to support trainees, and that came up in there about kind of helping your trainees move to the next step can be difficult because the sector is still it's just not quite there enough to recognize traineeships. Many museums do, and it's brilliant, but some just aren't thinking ahead in that way, and they're still quite traditional. So there's definitely some challenges for the sector, I think, quite widely in that.
Definitely. Yeah.
Ellen, I'm just going to come on to you about the kind of challenges you experienced.
Yeah, so I'm kind of the same as Megan. I actually had a really good year when I was just a trainee. I think the only thing, I don't know if anyone else had challenge, but I got quite a lot of responsibility off the get-go for taking on jobs that needed done, because it's such a small museum here. Like I said, you kind of have to be a jack of all trades. So the only thing might have been kind of the time management of actually doing the job and getting the experience to then have to sit down and kind of reflect on it and gather all the evidence. So you've got to be quite on the ball to remember to do that, because there was a lot of times there I was just doing my job and it was great, and then I thought, oh my goodness, I actually need to write this down or I'm not going to get my qualification. So it's kind of just trying to balance that. And yeah, I think I kind of agree. I'm really lucky in that I got a role in the same job, because I know from our little kind of group that unfortunately there has been a few people that have just struggled so hard to get a job afterwards. And I have noticed we try to kind of keep up with our CPD here as well, and there is still a slight stigma about the traineeships. I was looking at a workshop next year, I think it was Edinburgh Napier, and you know, just the way things are worded sometimes can be a bit of a challenge. You know, they want you to have a degree or any lesser qualifications that might be kind of relevant, which is totally relevant, but yeah, I think there is still a bit of a stigma to get over. And like Megan said, I think sometimes you can get a bit of imposter syndrome, even though you've got all this experience, but just that whole, I don't have a degree, because none of us had degrees when we did the training. That was the whole reason for the training, is you weren't to have a degree. So yeah, I think that's the biggest challenge, is kind of destigmatizing traineeships or internships, because I think a lot of people academically might think, you know, it's just doing a role, but actually the amount of experience you gain is massive, and actually the amount of responsibility you get as well is massive as well. It was for me anyway. So yeah, it's just trying to destigmatize the whole traineeship versus degree, basically.
What an absolutely horrible way of phrasing something. I don't like that at all.
Yeah, it's
so unnecessary.
Yeah.
I think you've kind of touched on this, actually, Ellen. Someone in the chat has asked, sorry, do you think this style of traineeship works for all types of museums? For example, did people in smaller museums have a different experience to those in larger organizations or nationals? So you've said that you basically were thrown in at the deep end with responsibility, and that's in a smaller organization.
Yeah, I actually think a lot of people might think that if you worked for a big organization that you would be able to get loads of experience, but as far as I know from speaking to some of the other guys who were on the traineeship who worked in the bigger museums, not all of them, I know some people did get quite a lot of responsibility, but I actually think working in a smaller museum, I actually might have gotten more experience because I was more needed in every aspect. You know, they needed someone to come in and do certain roles, and you know, like I said, keep saying, like, we are such jack of all trades here. Like we do our roles, you know, there's myself and the marketing manager, for example, but I'm also a duty manager on site. So there's days where I have to run the entire organization and make sure everyone's doing their jobs. Like I said, I've been out wheelbarrowing logs of wood for our fires. You know, you really do get such a good rounded experience in a small museum, whereas in a large museum, I don't know about nationals or anything like that, but if you have been given a role in such a large place, then there might not be actually as much opportunity because the departments are so large and they might be more spread out. So yeah, actually, surprisingly for some people, I think, to hear, small museums actually do give you a really, really good experience because you've got that ability. You've got such a small team that you can actually get a lot of the experience.
I wonder if any of the other panelists would like to weigh in on this. Do you give me a wave and we'll come to you. Elliot's nodding. Fab.
Yeah, I totally agree with what Ellen was just saying there. The Maritime Museum itself is also quite a small crew. So there was days where I was coming in and yeah, sure, we'll maybe dealing with 60 school kids that day. But then straight after it's like, right, okay, VS can clean up. Elliot, your time is to now deinstall this new exhibition, deinstall this exhibition and set up the new exhibition we're getting in. So it was very much a day where I was coming out, like, I know for the first half of my day, I might be dealing with what I'm doing education-wise, but then it might be something completely varied or completely different. Either like, oh, the roof's leaking, go and check on that maintenance-wise, or as I would just said there, with deinstalling and reinstalling exhibitions, or going around and checking pest traps and making sure all the pest documents and everything like that are up to date. So it was very varied in what we were doing. And as it's been said, it's very much a jack of all trades as a smaller organization. You might get that in the bigger organizations. I don't really know. I've never really talked to many people who work at the nationals, so I don't know the experience there. But I know for smaller organizations, definitely everyone needs to pitch in and try and help, the pun intended, the ship keep afloat kind of deal.
And Megan or Hermione, is there anything you'd want to add on this, or it's okay if no? I'll move on to another question. Yeah, Megan.
The only thing I would say during our traineeship, there was not MGS, sorry, NMS was quite heavily involved in a lot of the workshops that we done, and they're obviously a large museum body. So I think for the trainees that were based at NMS, they actually did get quite a well-rounded experience working there, and did get to have a lot of different training aspects. And because of those workshops, that did kind of helped for the trainees that were maybe kind of stuck within their well, not stuck, sorry, it's the wrong word to use, but we're just kind of quite narrow within their role, that they weren't based in a smaller museum and couldn't experience everything. Because all of these workshops, they did get a little taster of that. So that was a good point.
Thanks. And anything to add on this, Hermione? Are we ready for a new question? Fabulous. So I'm going to pick another question out from the chat. I think I'd like to, so there's a few questions around kind of, can I use this for, would you recommend this if you're looking for a career change? When should I do this? I'm already completing a master's, and how's it different to volunteering? And I know that's less a question than a series of connected statements, but I wonder if any of you are able to just reflect on kind of what's special about a traineeship, and when is a good time to do it, do you think?
I think it's perfectly honest, whenever you're ready. A traineeship is a good thing to get on, to take all of those kind of experience on. With myself in the museum, I was working here now 7 years in total, and I was started off as a volunteer, then worked in visitor services, then done Skills for Success, and now in the role that I was in. And working as a volunteer here, I can say that I definitely learned more on the actual traineeship than I did as the volunteer, because there's also that stigma where this person's a volunteer, we don't want to give them so much stuff to do that they're already working for us for practically for free. As a volunteer, we don't want to give them too much to do already, while with a traineeship, in some regards, you're given more responsibilities and everything like that, and you're able to do more of the stuff that you want to do and more of the stuff that the organization trusts you to do. But there's still, as we've discussed, the stigma around traineeships. Definitely worth getting into whenever, if you can do it, or if you have time to do it. There's always time to upskill yourself and train, and career change. As I said, with myself, I was originally looking for a more visitor facing job. Because of this traineeship, I've totally pivoted more towards education. So there's always time to change if you have that mindset, and if you want to follow that path, then go for it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. To get the most out of any kind of development opportunity at all, you have to be in the right place in your life and other things that are going on with you to get the best out of it. And that's true no matter what it is that you might be doing. Has anyone else got any kind of reflections on that area, maybe?
I've seen the question from Natalia about to take part in the traineeship before she completes her degree. I'm sure for our traineeship, it was that they were specifically looking for people that didn't have degrees when we signed up. But yeah, it's like Elliot just said, if you're in the middle of completing your master's and you feel like it's time for you to do the traineeship, then go for it. It's definitely the best decision I ever made. And yeah, there was another question here, sorry, about a career change your career path as well. Yeah, I would definitely go for it. It was a large jump from Virgin Media selling tellies to working in a museum, but you've just got to make that leap,
Any other reflections on this kind of topic, Ellen?
Yeah, so I think with the question about the difference between the traineeship and volunteering, as Elliot said, you're kind of given more responsibility, but I think the main thing is that when you do a traineeship, you get a tangible qualification at the end, so it gives you a really good goal to strive towards. So there was the good thing as well is because it was a year, if you did the qualification and you decided maybe museums weren't for you, then it's a year. It's a year of your life, you know, it's not a huge amount, but you have this actual tangible qualification that you can go and say, not only did I give my time to this organisation, but I actually managed to get a credible qualification from it. So that's the biggest difference between volunteering and doing this style of traineeship. And I'm in the same boat, especially as Megan. You know, I was working on the reception desk of a hotel before this, and I've gone from, you know, just working in the museum in general to then working in marketing, and I have had absolutely no experience in marketing before I worked here. So I got all of that experience hands-on. So it has been a massive career change for me. So yeah, I would just say, yeah, if you feel like you need a career change, then that's probably a really good sign that you do need one. And you know, you can volunteer with places, and obviously volunteering is such a valid way to get experience. But the traineeship's just a little bit more because you get that tangible qualification at the end.
And with volunteering, I mean, first, there's no way for all that. I mean, I had a passion for history and art and stuff like that. There's no way I would have been able to volunteer really, because I needed to work. I needed a wage. So with the traineeship, we were on what's the word? I forgot the name, like a living wage. So we were getting paid for it as well, which is amazing. And you know, there's some traineeships out there that I've seen in the past that are nothing like that, that they you know, they may advertise themselves as traineeships, but it is pretty much just volunteering, which is shocking that they still get away with that. But yeah, the MGS one was amazing because we were actually getting paid, so it made it accessible for, you know, someone like me that I wouldn't have been able to do it otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, that's really important. I think a minimum requirement is that people are paid enough money to live on in any traineeship
Definitely.
role, internships, anything like that. I mean, fair museum jobs would be outraged to hear any other examples, but so outraged, please tell us about them, because we like to have a go at people on Twitter. It's just what we live for. Hermione, have you got anything to add on that? Or if not, I have another different question for you.
You broke up a bit there. I
Oh.
don't know if we could hear what you said.
Sorry, I had your internet is unstable notice. Sorry for that. I was just saying, if Hermione has anything to add on this, or...
Hermione, you're still muted, I believe.
Oh, just that it was the traineeship was tailored specifically to learning sections. So the 6 mandatory units of the SVQ and understanding of each section, which then meant that you were able to I can't think, so that you wouldn't learn if you were just doing a volunteering thing. So if I was to say I want to volunteer in collections care, I don't think I would have learnt in the same way as the traineeship, because it had sort of geared up to being a learning process. So I think you got a more grounded experience, like a wider experience, a more detailed one. So it is better than just volunteering in that respect. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
That makes sense. That definitely makes sense. I was going to come to you as well on a question from the chat about talking about the mentoring aspect of the program. So did you have a mentor? Were they in your organization or elsewhere? And how did all of that work?
We had mentors out with our organizations. I think most of them were out with. I don't think anyone's just within. And it was a really bizarre sort of setup that I wasn't at all sure about, but actually I benefited really from it. And I'm still in touch with my mentor now, not as a mentor, but just like because they were really useful and they gave great advice. Not advice, it wasn't advice. It was just like, it was good to speak to someone else that had other ideas and that was outside of our organization. but was also working in the museum sector. So the mentoring role was really good. It was a bit like some of the aspects of the SVQ. I didn't think it would be something I would appreciate, but actually I found it really beneficial.
Would anyone else like to reflect on their mentoring part of the experience?
Yeah, I actually, similar to Hermione, in that when we first were told that we were going to have mentors, I was a bit like, okay, I think in a way, sometimes I thought that I maybe had too much support because they had like my manager at Dumfries where I was based, and then there was Marcus, who was kind of running the programme, and then all of the staff at MGS as well were quite involved and, you know, really supportive and always coming in to check that we were okay and stuff like that when we were in visiting, doing workshops. And then this to have the mentor added as well, I was like, when am I ever going to need to go to this person? Because I would generally go to my manager, but the mentor was there for people that maybe felt they couldn't approach their manager about things that were going on in the traineeship, or maybe if they didn't particularly see their manager a lot or get on with their manager. So I think for some people it was a bit of a lifesaver, maybe the mentor. But similar to Hermione, my mentor worked at MGS and she was in marketing, which is something completely that I'm not involved in any way. So it was good to have like a kind of third party outsider looking at my traineeship and kind of giving their thoughts and what my next step should be, if that makes sense. So they were actually really useful, and yeah, they were all lovely as well.
And Elliot, I think you wanted to come in as well.
Yeah, I had kind of the opposite experience with my mentor, sadly. The first meeting went perfectly great and the mentorship seemed like it was going off to a great start. But then after that, throughout the rest of my year, during my traineeship, I had no communication at all with my mentor. Luckily, though, with myself and knowing the people I worked with, I had a great support system within the actual workplace itself. And MGS, it sounds like Marcus was a great help with everything I ever needed to do with the work as well. And then there was also all the actual trainees themselves that we all met and all the people we worked alongside, and then all of the actual training courses. So I felt like, sure, I might not have been getting that kind of mental stimuli, kind of help and nudges in the right direction from my mentor, but I was getting it from everywhere else it needed to be. So that's my only critique of the actual whole thing, that if you're going to be a mentor, then be ready to be one is the best way I can say it. And actually make yourself available to the people you're meant to be mentoring.
That comes into, someone in the chat has raised, like, were there any sort of any negatives that you experienced? And we've touched on a few throughout, so I haven't sort of posed the question directly, but that sounds like that was definitely one of them. And I think mentoring is hard. Not everyone can and necessarily should be doing that at every point in their career. It is a skill set for the mentor as well. So I'm glad that you were getting that support from elsewhere, though, at least. Ellen, do you have anything to add on that topic as well?
Yeah, I suppose from my point of view, I'm a bit with Megan that it was maybe too much support. And you know, from my point of view, I didn't necessarily need my mentor. She was amazing and she was really lovely, and anything that I did need help, I got, but we were it was quite formal, the whole mentorship aspect. And I did feel sometimes that I kind of had to think of things to ask her because we had to have at least 3 meetings within the year with them. And I had such a good support, and I suppose personally I'm just quite an independent, get on with it person anyway, so I found personally I didn't need my mentor, which is totally fine. But from experience, my supervisor who worked here at the time was actually a mentor for another training candidate at a different museum, and I know that she really helped the other trainee a lot. So, you know, it just depends on the person, I think. I personally felt like I didn't need a mentor and I didn't really use her, unfortunately. Whereas the other trainee who had my supervisor as a mentor, they talked all the time and she found her really helpful. So I think it just depends on who you are and if you feel like you need a mentor. And like you said, yeah, I think you've got to be a certain type of person to be a mentor.
I think this is quite a good segue into my final kind of one of our prepared questions, is that you have now stepped into the role of assessing the current trainees. And I wonder, how do you find it? Has it changed how you think about your experience? And what skills have you kind of learned from taking that on? I'm going to start with Megan, if that's okay.
Yeah, it's been a weird, for me, one of the main challenges is kind of to change from the role of being a trainee or the one who was the learner only in 2019 to then in 2020 to go from that to like a kind of authoritative, knowledgeable kind of, you know, assessor position is really odd. And that's one of the challenges that I feel like I have to kind of switch from one type of career to the complete opposite. So but it's been amazing. I have 2 learners in a museum. We've just not long started, obviously due to COVID and everything, so we started in September when it was meant to be earlier on in the year. But yeah, it's definitely a different challenge, and luckily, like we've kind of mentioned, the qualification is tailored. It can be tailored specifically to the learner and how they best learn things, you know, their needs and their learning styles. So it's really good for tailoring it to whoever does it. Like one of my learners has a kind of visual, I forgot the name of it. They have some sort of visual learning disorder. So instead of doing a lot of written essays, I'm able to have like professional discussions with them and record it, and then we can go back and add that to parts of their unit and stuff like that. So just even simple little things like that is amazing, that it doesn't all have to be essay written stuff, you know.
That's fantastic. Would anyone else like to reflect on their experience of the other side?
Yeah, so yeah, I'm in the same kind of boat as Megan. It's been a massive learning curve, just in terms of learning about other people's learning, if that makes sense. So, you know, we all learn in different styles. I personally, when I did my SVQ, found doing reflective accounts and doing written work the easiest way to do it. And that's basically what I did for my whole unit. But you know, one of my learners might struggle with that a little bit more, so want to do like more professional discussions or Q&A sessions. So it's been an interesting learning journey. Yeah, just learning about other people's learning styles and having to kind of tailor it to them. So it's interesting in that respect.
And Elliot, you raised your hand as well.
Yeah, it's just good to see the other side of it. Like I've done 4 SVQs now, so this is good to then be able to do the assessor and be like, this is how the assessor approach things. And then with my 2 assessees, they're totally taking the bulls by the horns is the best way I can put it, and definitely putting me through my paces as an assessor. And it's good to then get that trial by fire is the best way to put it. But knowing that I'm also still not on my own, as we have our other assessors just here, us 4 together, and then we also have Marcus, that if any problem comes up, we know we're able to then contact them and being able to talk through any issues that we do have. So it's good to get that kind of perspective on things. It's always great to be like, oh no, I'm progressing my own learning, but then it's good to then also being able to help other people learn and progress their knowledge and see them building up the skills that they're learning on their own and what they're doing on their job as well.
And Hermione, is there anything else you can reflect on that experience too?
I just agree with everybody. Pretty much, we've had a very similar sort of experience. I think they're very lucky, the trainees, the people doing the SVQ right now, because they've got the support of people who've just done it. So they're sort of being supported by people that have done the museum SVQ, whereas we were supported by people that were SVQ assessors across the board and maybe didn't have as much museum experience. So it was, I think that's a positive, definitely.
I did an MVQ quite early on in my working life, and the person had no idea how libraries worked, so she was trying to assess me but didn't kind of have that background knowledge, which made it definitely a bit more complicated. I definitely found.
Yeah. My assessor was doing a set, I think similar to, I think Ellen said she had a similar situation with her assessor, is that she had about 60 odd candidates or something like that, and it was to do with customer service for Arnold Clark, majority of them. So to go from that to museums, you know, it was a bit of a challenge with my assessor, which is one of the other things I should have mentioned with the challenges.
And we've got just 1 minute left, so this is hopefully a question that you can raise with a kind of yes, no type thing, but it is difficult. How much space, was there space for you to put your own ideas and opinions in when you were a trainee?
Definitely.
100%, yes. A different perspective. They were always looking for that, and yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah, given enough perspective to be able to make my own exhibition within the museum. So yeah, they definitely made as much space that they needed for us.
Yeah, definitely. The whole point was about diversifying the sector, so they were super keen to have all of our ideas.
Yeah.
I think you would hope that the organisations who would be choosing to host a trainee in that kind of scheme would know they want to give people the space. So I'm definitely glad to hear that you were all able to do that. I think that's our final question. We're just about coming up to 1 o'clock in a few seconds. So thank you all for your time, Megan, Ellen, Elliot and Hermione, and thank you for joining us potentially over your lunch break to hear about the Skills for Success scheme. We will make the recording available later, and we will save bits in the chat as well and make some resources available. So thank you all so much for your time. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.